his brow furrowed as he took in the two images in front of him. Then he raced over to their medical charts to find their blood work. It didn't make sense. Brianna and her sister watched with growing concern as the doctor's eyes widened further and further in disbelief. "How is this possible?" he muttered. Suddenly, he looked at them with something resembling fear. Before we start our story, smash the like button, make sure to subscribe and hit the notifications bell so you won't miss any new stories. Brianna Dean and her twin sister Brittany had a special bond. They were closer than any other twins they knew. But when it came to their dating life, they preferred to keep their love interests quiet until they were sure it was serious. This worked out great for the most part. But this time, Brianna really wished she said something sooner. The girls were unique women, with their own likes, personality quirks, and attitudes. One big example was the fact that Brittany loved flying, but Brianna was terrified, which made vacations quite the challenge. However, their individuality didn't spare them from the many problems that life made them suffer through together. Brittany remembered one particularly scary hospital visit when they were very young. All she knew was that both of them were in pain and could barely breathe, while their parents yelled at the doctors for not knowing what they were doing. After that, the twins developed a distrust of health professionals, and it was a distrust that would be tested sooner than they thought. Brianna bumped into her future husband at a twins festival in Twinsburg, Ohio. His name was Josh Salyers, and he also had a twin, Jeremy. Brittany and Jeremy casually chatted as sparks flew between Brianna and Josh. Soon they fell in love, and it was time to tell Brittany that she finally found the one. But Brittany also had a secret of her own. Brianna watched her sister's face transform into shock and awe as she told her all about Josh Salyers. Her reaction didn't make much sense until she returned the favor and told her that she had been dating his twin brother, Jeremy, where things had also gotten serious. The girls dreamed of a white wedding and of all four of them moving into the same house. They wanted to live together under one roof so that they would stay as close together as possible and remain in each other's lives. But first, there was something they had to do, and soon they'd find out that this wouldn't be the fairy tale they were hoping for. They had to visit the doctor. All they wanted to do was talk to a midwife, but the entire family eventually pressured them into visiting a bland office that smelled of disinfectant. Bad news had always filled places like these. When the doctor walked in, wearing a slight frown, their hearts started to race. Was it bad news? Since Brianna and her sister were in their late 30s, they decided they wanted to get a fertility check. It was just a precaution. But when they told the doctor that they were dating identical twins too, they were shocked by what the doctor said. Although they were fertile, the doctor warned them against starting a family with their unorthodox partners, but Brittany and Brianna wouldn't listen. It wasn't long after that Josh and his twin Jeremy proposed simultaneously to Brianna and Brittany. As in keeping with the way the two pairs of twins have lived their lives, they did absolutely everything together. They got married together, bought a house to live in together. Everything seemed to be going great, but deep within the corners of Brianna's mind, all she could think of was the doctor's stark warning. Brittany and her sister Brianna had made headlines when they got engaged to another pair of identical twins. The story went viral, and TLC offered to pay for the entire wedding if they could film and air the event. It was a magical experience that was so different compared to the years leading up to this special day. Brianna felt jitters and tears as she walked down the aisle and got married with her best friend and twin sister right beside her. And the wonderful euphoria lasted all the way through the honeymoon. Of course, it wasn't long until they were both pregnant. The amazing news, however, was quickly countered with an unpleasant reality. Brianna tried to ignore the feeling that something wasn't quite right about all this. Perhaps the ideas about how they wanted to live their life were wrong. She held her swollen tummy in her hands as she wished she stayed to listen to what the doctor had to say. What was so important that he'd discourage them from starting a family? Disaster was just around the corner. Brittany was 3 months pregnant when she suffered a miscarriage. With Brianna 4 weeks behind her, She feared that this same thing would happen to her. They had the same body after all. After an anxious wait, it was as predicted. Brianna followed in her sister's footsteps and had a miscarriage at exactly the same time frame. It was a devastating loss, but it didn't discourage them. It was less than half a year by the time Brianna and Brittany found themselves pregnant again. This time, the pregnancies were smooth and their checkups with their doctor were more frequent. But once again, they faced another warning. They listened as the doctor reinstated how rare this situation actually was and how little they knew about the repercussions involved in such a medical anomaly. The doctor sat across from their group and sighed. "Ladies, I thought I told you to come and talk to me before you decided to start a family." Brianna felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up in anger. "No, you told our mother that." He shook his head and pulled out a folder. It was her and Brittany's medical history. He went on to use words like testing, health, prenatal preparation, and a bunch of other medical jargon. She tightened the grip on her husband's hand. Who was he to say they shouldn't have kids now? She was about to tell him off. But the next piece of news was heartbreaking. The doctor went on to explain that because of their past genetic problems and the pending tests on their husbands, there was a chance that both she and her sister's baby could have the same defective genetic issues passed down to them. In short, their kids could be as sick as the girls had been when they were babies. "It's obviously your body and your choice," the doctor said. "I just wish you would have come here so we could have prepared better. Now, all we can do is watch closely and be careful." Brianna leaned into her husband and started to cry. Two thoughts crashed and fought around in her head. First, she hated everything to do with hospitals. But second, it was her job to make sure her family would be safe and healthy. Babies might have been a grab bag of genetic materials, but their pairing of identical twins created an entirely different set of odds. Then the doctor looked at their scans. His eyes popped as he took in the two images he held in his hands. Then, he raced over to their medical charts to find their blood work. It didn't make sense. Brianna and her sister watched with growing concern as the doctor's eyes darted across their scans and test documents. What was he seeing? "Is everything okay?" Brianna asked as she looked at her sister, who lay on the ultrasound table beside her. Then suddenly, the doctor's mind stopped racing. His eyes widened in disbelief as he let out a big sigh. His hands fell to his side as he approached the twins. What was wrong? Was this what he warned them about? But what he was about to say was far beyond anyone's expectations, including his own. The doctor grabbed a chair and sat next to the twins as he explained what the test results were now beginning to show. It was the unknown that he was most nervous about for them. But now, things were starting to become clear. Although Brianna's and Brittany's babies are from two different fathers and two different mothers, they are only respectively cousins, which means, genetically speaking, Brianna and Brittany's children, current or future, as long as they remain with their spouses, will always be full biological siblings to each other, even though they would have different parents. For an OB doc, this is like winning the lottery. It's really that rare, said their doctor. And for the couples, winning the lottery is exactly what this discovery felt like. Still, at that point, all they could do was go on beach rest together. They smiled at their growing bellies, giggled at their identical cravings for pickles and starburst candies, and held each other tight when something felt wrong. It's time. 8 months and 2 weeks later, Brianna was the first to go into labor. In fine twin fashion, Brittany felt her water break only hours later. The worst part was being separated. She gripped her husband's arm and gave one final push. Cries filled the delivery room. The same pain wave after wave of pain washed over Brianna's body, but all she could do was endure. Somewhere, she knew her sister was in the same agony. They had ignored all the warnings. It was their choice, their lives. All they could do was pray for it to end and for them to learn the truth. Good news. Despite the high risk, both babies were perfectly healthy. They had won the DNA lottery and wouldn't have to suffer as their mothers had. Holding their tiny infants, they both agreed to consult a doctor before having another. Viral news. Brianna, Brittany, and their husbands were thrilled that their children would be both siblings and cousins. Living under the same roof, their family dynamic was unique. However, the world reacted differently. Reporters flooded them with interview requests, and their story spread quickly, stirring mixed reactions. Unique Situation TLC documented the Dean sisters' wedding, titling it, "Our Twin-Sane Wedding." The identical twin couples married by twin ministers gained widespread attention. The recent announcement of their babies only increased their fame. What are the odds? It's rare for an identical twin to marry another identical twin, making their story fascinating. Their journey captivated netizens and TV viewers alike, attracting praise and criticism. The Good Life. Some found Brianna and Brittany's lifestyle odd. They lived together, raised their children together, and shared an inseparable bond. Critics called it unusual, but to them, it was simply practical. It works for them. Both sisters worked at the same law firm, while their husbands also worked together. Commuting together saved time and money, and being inseparable felt natural to them. While unconventional, it worked perfectly for their family. Always one question. Despite their happiness, they often faced skepticism, but they ignored negativity, embracing their choices. One question, however, was always asked. Did they ever get confused? Do they ever get confused? During interviews, people frequently questioned whether they had ever mistaken their spouses for each other. The twins always dismissed this, finding the idea absurd. Brittany even called it odd for people to think about such things. All planned. Brittany and Brianna planned their pregnancies meticulously. "If Brittany were pregnant, I'd rather be pregnant too," Brianna explained. They wanted to experience motherhood together, navigating changes side by side. Even more similarities. Before meeting their husbands, Brianna and Brittany had already embraced their identical lifestyle, sharing everything. Their husbands, Jeremy and Josh, mirrored them in many ways, making their bond even stronger. Soulmates. In another uncanny parallel, Brianna and Jeremy were both firstborn twins, while Brittany and Josh were both secondborn. Their symmetry was undeniable, making their connection feel like destiny. Destiny. It seemed as though the twin pairs were destined for each other. Brittany gravitated toward Jeremy, Brianna to Josh, as if instinctively drawn to their perfect match. If it were a story, it might seem too perfect, but it was real. Stars aligning. The stars had to align. I get to marry the man of my dreams, and at the same time, I get to look over and see my twin sister marrying the man of her dreams, Brittany said in an interview. The odds of such an event were astounding, but for the Salyer couples, their childhood dreams had come true.